I'm so glad you decided to join us to talk about high impact practices and gen ed courses. We've got several people here to share their knowledge and experience, and we only have a short bit of time, so I'm going to go right ahead and introduce our first speaker, Abdu Nadoya, who will present on kind of an overview of high impact practices in gen ed, and then we'll move on to our guests. So Abdu, take it away.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you everyone else for attending and also for participating in this session with us. So I just wanted to briefly go over some of the things that's already been discussed by our keynote speaker, but also just tied to general education and student success. So I think from the session, you just kind of get an idea of, how and what are the ways high impact practices can affect student success. And some of those, as you could see, were really retention, persistence, but also by giving students a higher sense of belonging, higher levels of learning, but also engagement and lifelong learning. So these are ways that HIPS can really promote student success. So if this is something you want to do, then just, general education seems to be one of the perfect place where you want to hit those markers for just a couple of reasons. So if you think about it, NKU Foundation of Knowledge share those same goals by trying to promote those skills, but also those qualities early on. So, and I'm just going to share here briefly the mission of the NKU General Education Program, which is called the Foundation of Knowledge. And I just highlight in red some of the key words that kind of relate to what we talked about HIPS. So here what I'm trying to do, just to draw a parallel between the goals and what HIPS can help you do and what we're trying to do with the general education program at NKU. So therefore, if you look at this, gen ed just provides a number of opportunities for us to promote high impact practices. First of all, it's an opportunity to reach more students. Now, if HIPS are known, or there is evidence to show that they promote, sense of belonging, they promote retention. So where is the best place really to reach all of the students you want to achieve, you want to reach? So that would be really, if you think about it, the general education program. So think about really how many students go through that gen ed program, how many students, different majors, different background, regardless of socioeconomic, all of them, they go through the same program. But the other opportunity also would be early exposure. We were talking about that chart that our keynote speakers shared for the NESI, that's showing how many of our students are saying they've participated in one or two more HIPS. So, but one of the key ideas here is if you get them engaged early on, then one, that's something they're developing an awareness of from, but also their understanding, and that's something also they can seek out. So by exposing them earlier to HIPS, you're promoting also retention and persistence, but also think about the groups she talked about, like those first-gen students, which we have a lot of them. Okay, so all those non-traditional students, but also for traditional students, early on, early exposure to HIPS can help also promote their sense of belonging, can help promote retention, can help also promote persistence. So if you think about it, those are the ways that we're trying to see how the general education program can be an ideal place where we start implementing these HIPS, these practices, so that students can be early exposed on those practices, but also something they can go to their majors with already having experience with those high impact practices. So that's just the brief overview I wanted to give to best make sure, we're connecting gen ed with HIP here. And then for the rest of the session, we'll be going through examples that our faculty are providing of how they have been implementing HIPS in their general education courses.
Great, thanks, Abdu. If we'll go to the next slide, we're going to introduce a group of faculty from CINSAM who are been working with collaborative learning projects in Science 110, Integrative Science. And so hopefully Ruben, Christina, and Ashley are on. They can unmute their microphones, and hopefully as the speakers, they'll show up when they talk. So I don't know, Ruben or Christina or Ashley, who wants to go first, but if you want to tell us about your project.
Very good. My name is Reuben Bullard, although I'm known primarily on campus as Rick Bullard. And I'll be speaking first, and then I believe Ashley will wrap things up. Let me just say, make a brief comment about the course. Integrative Science is, as it sounds, it's a natural science course, and we integrate the different science disciplines in sort of a holistic effort. Although we go step by step in addressing the different disciplines, we identify what science is, we identify what and different types of analysis are, and then we go through each discipline. But as we go through, we keep themes or threads that tie each discipline to the overall understanding of the natural world. But we want to go a step beyond that, of course, and as an introductory course in applying what we're learning in the course to life in general. And one way in which we do this is by emphasizing the scientific method and by emphasizing critical thinking skills, developing an understanding and ability to apply the scientific method in areas other than science, as well as using critical thinking skills from everything from, is this really the best value for a loaf of bread, to buying a car, to buying a house, to finding a life mate. Using critical thinking skills are highly applicable. And so getting students beyond the idea of, okay, I'm just in a science class and this is all just science stuff, and I don't like science, overcoming all those kinds of things. But then getting to the heart of the matter here in terms of HIP, we are, of course, integrating a lot of things. And one of the things that we emphasize is group work in the course. The classroom design is actually set up in terms of lab tables where typically 4 students will sit together and form a group, an investigation team, we might say, from the very beginning. And so there's collaboration that occurs really from the very first day. As students get to know each other, we have them share a little bit with each other so that they know something about each other. And then we start off with a project where objects are placed on each of the tables and they have to talk about how these different objects relate to each other. It's fossils, rocks, bones, plants, different things like that, and how these are connected to each other and understanding how the natural world functions. And it's a little bit of an exercise to get them talking amongst themselves, and they are to come up with a story of how these things relate to each other. It's just an interesting project that serves kind of as an icebreaker. As we move on through the course then, teamwork and collaboration are important factors in most of the investigations. There are some investigations that are done individually, different projects, but typically even when they do an individual project, they then bring their data from that project back to the classroom, and then we share and compile the data and generate some statistics and that sort of thing. Example of this is the number of revolutions that a tire on a car makes to go 1 mile. And they actually have to go out, measure a tire, get the diameter, calculate the circumference, calculate how many times it turns, and then bring that data back to class. And then we compile that into a Excel spreadsheet that is projected in the class, and people can kind of see how their data compares to other data, and also how their data relates to a hypothetical tire dealer's claim that a tire makes 800 revolutions per mile, and is that correct or not? And so evaluating, does real world data match up to a claim that somebody makes? And so what's the significance of an average? And so they're combining their data there and seeing how it relates as a group. But once we move past these things, you have then table discussions about what is science, case study like childbed fever study from the 1840s. They talk about this within their groups. Physics and investigations, chemistry investigations, where we do different kinds of equipment setups, and they actually have to collaborate with each other in terms of working with the apparatus, collecting the data. So there's teamwork involved there. But probably the key exercise in the course is a group experiment. The group experiment, they actually have to come up with an investigation, a question or problem, design an experiment that will test their hypotheses regarding that, and then conduct the experiment, collect the data, and then present it to the class. And so there's lots of collaboration and interaction there that get the students to work together. And so that's just kind of the nuts and bolts of some of the things we do in the integrative science class. Ashley, if you want to jump in here and talk a little bit about the assessment, how things have gone in terms of student response.
Yeah, great. I can do that. So we started assessing this course pretty deeply this spring, and some of the interesting things that we found, one of the things we started looking at was student self-efficacy for doing science. And oftentimes we think STEM students coming in, non-STEM students coming into a STEM course have pretty low self-efficacy. So we wanted to see what was going on in this course. What we really found was that this course in particular was increasing this idea of social persuasions and self-efficacy. So essentially, students were getting this feedback from peers and from the faculty that they were good at science. So during these interactions, working with peers, they were getting this feedback that, hey, you're pretty good at this. That they weren't getting in other situations. And so that was really a pretty remarkable finding. Something else that we found throughout the course is tied this idea of the carbon cycle. And so a culminating module is climate change. And students also in the course had an increase in their knowledge and in their confidence in their knowledge about climate change. And so that in these times is really important too, in their that self-efficacy for their ability to answer questions and really critically think. And so these high impact practices being put into practice by the Sci 110 faculty are really making some great impacts with the students. And the qualitative feedback we've gotten from students is really impressive. They really enjoy the class, and during the spring really were very sad to go online because they lost out in those connections and being able to work together as a group to do these projects.
Thanks so much, both Rick and Ashley. And I know Christina was involved in this course and putting it together as well. So thank you, talking about your collaborative learning. Next, we're going to go to Jessica Lott in her anthropology class. Abdu, if you want to change the slide there for us. Excellent. Anthropology World Cultures. Jessica, take it away.
Hi, I am Jessica Lott, and I'm Assistant Professor of Anthropology. Thanks so much for having me. I'm going to talk a little bit about using Wikipedia in my Gen Ed class, Anthro 201 World Cultures. So as a culminating project in the class, students use the tools and concepts that we've been building all semester to explore a non-Western culture or a topic of interest to them and contribute to its Wikipedia page. I provide them with a list of pages that are options, but I really encourage them to explore and find something they're interested in. So Wikipedia is a collaborative, online, free encyclopedia. Anyone can edit it, but it's also a nonprofit and employs paid editors as well. So by adding to a Wikipedia page, students are contributing to a public resource. It's an experiential learning project that really connects with students' daily lives because it's a resource that they often use, just like we also use, most people use in varying contexts, right? And I don't know if you ended up with my images on a slide or if they're just on Canvas.
They're just on campus.
Okay. But so last semester, I had 2 sections working on this, and as a group, they added over 12,000 words to Wikipedia and 117 references. So they also can see their work and how it adds up quickly to contribute. It also provides a way for them to collaborate on work beyond the classroom, because they're also working with other Wikipedia editors. And this also is able to teach information literacy and digital literacy. The latter is especially a perennial topic of interest and import, right? So there is some support for working with Wikipedia. There's a nonprofit called Wikipedia Education, or WikiEDU, that serves as a bridge between Wikipedia and higher education, and they provide support for professors and for students. And one thing that includes is a dashboard to help manage your project and for ease of grading. I have a screenshot on Canvas that shows what part of the readout is like for a pair of students who worked on adding to a page about ghosts and Polynesian culture. So if you want to check that out, that's there for you. But that readout shows that there's an interface where they highlight the passages that the students have added, so it's a little bit easier to read for the professor. And they also provide trainings and all kinds of resources to help you along. So there's definitely still a learning curve with building and implementing this project, but if you're comfortable with technology, then that support from them really makes it pretty manageable. I also provided sort of a abbreviated version of how I run this assignment in my class and it should be available on Canvas if you're interested in this. That said, the way I do this is not the only way to do it, but I scaffold assignments throughout the semester so students are building the skills and learning the information they need to be able to finally add to a Wikipedia page. So students learn about Wikipedia, they learn about reliable sources. We spend a few days in the library, and shout out to Lynn Warner. She's been super helpful in having me and helping me adapt this project for this class at NKU. They learn how to write in drafts, and they write a reflection essay at the end, so they are able to take a beat and think about what the experience was like and what it learned and how it connected to what we're doing in class. So like I said, there are various approaches. You could have students write an article, you could have them translate a page or part of a page if you're a world language professor, or you could use it as a jumping off point for larger research projects. There are really a variety of ways that you can have students use this as an engaged learning or high impact learning project. So if you are interested in this, feel free to reach out to me. I have my email in Canvas as well. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jessica. This was great, and I'm sure we'll get some questions in our chat if we have time. Next, we're going to go to the Meyerson projects, or service learning, community-based learning. And so Megan Cole, we have her going to be talking about her assignments in public speaking, communication studies 101.
Okay, thank you, Emily. I'm Megan Cole, and I teach primarily public speaking in our communication department. I also teach public speaking at Ivy Tech Community College sometimes. And if my work today has a theme, it's that we should never underestimate our students, specifically on the basis of age. I teach many high school and college freshmen. And so last fall, fall of 2018, I taught my very first Meyerson course, and it also happened to be a school-based scholar course at Boone County High School. And this quickly became a high-impact practice because I got to see high school juniors and seniors enact service learning and to enact speech in a real-life setting. Now, this practice, it lent itself seamlessly to one of our speeches already. Our final speech of the semester typically is a persuasive speech, and it's centered around fundraising. So in a regular non-service learning semester, I have students come up with an idea in a group, and they have to pitch it to their classmates. And then their classmates invest bonus points and decide who had the most persuasive presentation. All we did for the Meyerson switch was we were attaching real funds to this, and this motivated the students in a completely different way. Under my supervision, the students were completely responsible for contacting the nonprofits that they were interested in, and it was an incredible experience to watch. They reached out to groups like Family Promise and other nonprofits in the area, and ultimately the groups chose the presentation of a group of young women in the course who were suggesting that the Women's Crisis Center use the funds to create a self-defense course for women who came to the shelter and couldn't afford to pay for a self-defense course. Well, the Women's Crisis Center liked that so much, they implemented the idea. And I loved the component that the students went from giving speeches because they had to in the class to they had the opportunity to come to campus. Now, keep in mind, these aren't NKU students, right? These are students at a high school who are going anywhere. And they came to NKU and they got to present the speech. They got to present the award to the group at the Women's Crisis Center, and they got to thank them and accept that on their behalf. And I think that this carries forward in the future. I met one of the girls, the leader of that group, about a year ago. So 1 year later, she chose to come to NKU. She chose to study social work. And as far as I know, she began a mentoring relationship with the woman she was in contact with at the Women's Crisis Center. And they did implement that program. So long story short, I just want to emphasize, don't discount a class just because it's school-based scholars, and don't underestimate our students, because I've seen them rise to the occasion over and over and over again. If you all want to talk about that anymore, just let me know, and I'd love to chat with you about service learning and school-based scholar classes.
Great. Thank you so much, Megan. And I just want to make a plug. We have a whole session on the Marison Project after this group. So if you're intrigued by what Megan and Kimberly tell us, you can learn more about the Marison if you're thinking maybe now is the time. So Kimberly, Clayton Code, talk to us about Education 316.
All right, yes, I'm here to share EDU 316, Racism and Sexism in Educational Institutions. And similar to Megan, my course is a gen ed course, and it's open to all majors across campus. All of our education majors are actually required to take the course, and the sections that I teach usually have dual credit students in them. So it's sometimes a mix of high school students as well as traditional college students in the same class. And what we've done with the Marison Project is we've tried to connect it with diversity and with connecting it to K-12 classrooms and organizations. So ways that we can connect that, what we're learning on campus, to what's happening in the schools. Some examples of things we've done, we had funding from ArtsWave one semester, and we had to focus our efforts on looking at arts integration in K-12 schools. So what our class decided to do was we funded an arts project with Newport Independent Schools Gifted Program, and we also were able to develop a guide to local arts resources. So the students were able to have a tangible product in addition to selecting the organization to give the funding to. Another project that we ended up doing was helping to create a STEM lab in a local school and integrating diversity resources and technology resources into that school. A big message with the Marison Project is philanthropy and the emphasis on time, treasure, and talent. It's something that we all have the ability to give. You don't have to have a big pot of treasure. Your time and your talents matter as well. The other component we've been able to do is connect with the Young Women Lead Conference on campus. This is a conference we do for high school students. And the students who participate in that conference, we've been able to have a pot of money that those students are able to select organizations that influence women and girls and give money back. So it's kind of a full circle of support. And then the third component that we were able to do is we did a Saturday program for students. We did a philanthropy academy, and students in the EDU 316 course were assistants for the academy. And then the middle school students who came to campus and participated, we were able to connect with Fuel and do some work with Fuel, and we were able to come up with funding proposals that these students were able to select some organizations in the community to give back to. So it's very similar to what Megan was doing, where it's those connections with the real world and connections with the content from the course. So it makes it applicable, and it makes it something that is long lasting and impactful for them. I've found in my evaluations with the Marison Project, my teaching evaluations, it comes up every single time. So it's one of the more impactful things I think that I've been able to do. And I appreciate that we have that opportunity through the Marison Project and the Scripps Center. I want to plug Kaisa's presentation too. I think if you attend that, you'll find there's some terrific resources there that really enhance what we're doing. Thanks.
Thank you. I can really thank you all of our presenters. We're going to have time now for some questions, so feel free to put your questions on the chat. I'm going to start just by asking, one of the concerns that people have right now is faculty are being asked to do so much, not even putting aside the remote element of COVID-19. Could the speakers talk to you a little bit about, is it worth the extra effort to create these high impact practices for your courses? What do you feel like you really see enough of? I know some of you already spoken to this, but let's talk a little bit about it in generic terms about how much work did it take to put it together, and then do you think it was well worth it, or even words of advice about next time maybe for the people who are just considering trying to incorporate or integrate a high impact practice into their class. I don't know if you want to use a hand thing or Abdu, if you want to stop sharing your screen so I can see more faces in case we have a hand raised. Anybody have a response of our speakers that want to go first? Just unmute yourself and dive in to start with. Jessica.
I can start. So this Wikipedia project I've been doing is, it definitely takes startup time, but if you're having students write in drafts anyway, then I found that as you teach it subsequently, the workload isn't significantly more than usual. And it kind of depends how your workflow is. I like that I get a lot of work throughout instead of a big final paper at the end of the semester. So it's kind of personal preference. But after you get this going and know the technology, then there's much less workflow that if you're comfortable with technology, right? And I think working with your strengths is another way to sort of limit some of the work on your end.
Megan, I see a hand.
I'd just like to reiterate that you don't have to start from scratch for a high impact practice. So I took something that was already existing in my class and swapped a few items. I didn't have to do much reworking of the rubric. I didn't have to do much reworking of the assignment. So it doesn't have to be that you come up with this brilliant idea and start from the ground up. Don't let it be intimidating. You can start where you're at. So a good way to begin would be to look at the assignments you already have and just think of a new way to do it.
Other comments? Rick, sorry.
That's okay. Either way is good. I think that the nature of the course that we teach, Science 110, automatically just kind of lends itself. Oftentimes science classes, you work with a lab partner, or there's some kind of collaboration. And so it's relatively easy in our course, it's really from design that there is this collaboration within the class. Now, many of you are dealing with things that are situations that reach outside of the course, but I think that in terms of designing interaction, any kind of interaction where students are talking, we have some of our investigations are not collaborative, they're actually competitive. There's a biology exercise where we use different, what represents different bird beaks, and they compete for a single pool of food. And there's another investigation that we do where you select different positions regarding GMO food sources and then debate back and forth on that within the course. And so sometimes there's collaboration, sometimes there's a little bit of tension in the way in which the activity is conducted. But I think any course can have in classroom interactions and discussions that help to stimulate and inspire the students.
Feel free to post your questions on the chat if you have any, or if any of our participants or just attendees have a comment about their experience with high impact practices. I'd be happy to have you share, raise a hand, or just open your mic. Anything? I was curious, I'll ask another question. Jessica, with your Wikipedia, I know Wikipedia editors turn down or accept changes. Did you have a lot of them accepted? And what do you do with a student who turned down? I'm sure that's a learning opportunity, but you want to talk a little bit about that, just very specific to you.
Yeah, so I build time in my timeline about a week between when they put up their, when they make their work live to Wikipedia and when they do their final reflection, because part of the requirement is that they interact in good faith with Wikipedia editors, right? I tell them their final grade doesn't depend on if someone on Wikipedia likes their thing or not. They can turn in what they feel is their best draft. But that process of, and I compare it to a peer review process for them, right? At a certain point, you have to put your work out to the world and people are going to give you feedback. So I haven't had any issues with disrespectful editors, but things certainly getting taken down whole hog or edited along the way. And sometimes that is frustrating, but then you just help the students through it and that helps them improve their writing.
Sure, that's cool. Abdu, I saw your hand. Did you have a hand?
Yes. I just have one question, and some of you started alluding to it in your presentation. So in these high impact practices you have in these gen ed courses, could you talk about ways, or if you had a chance to actually engage the student in reflecting on that experience and how it may have affected or impacted them? I know, Kimberly, you started talking about, for example, your course evaluation, how they start going up, but could you just speak to student articulating and talking to you about how they reflected on this and how it may have benefited them?
Whoever likes to go first. Kimberly, you want to start?
I'll start since you said my name.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, the final, I have the Mayerson project in my class divided into different parts. Like Jessica said, if you chunk it and put it into pieces, it's much more manageable. And the final component is actually where they write a reflection. They write a reflection about the project itself and its outcomes. They write a reflection on how it changed them as a future educator. And then they write a reflection about the impact that they thought it would have on the organization or classroom, and then how that's going to change their practice in the future. So we do actually have that reflection built in.
I'd like to build off of that because it's the same thing in our course. We use a reflection paper at the end of every semester, and I do it in every public speaking course because so many students take it because they have to, right? So I find that it's really meaningful in any gen ed for students to have to reflect on what they learned and why they were there. So it lends itself handily to service learning and high impact practice as well.
Emily, there are questions in the chat, I believe. You're muted, Emily. You're muted.
There we go. Let's go to the last question first. Any thoughts on implementing HIPS in more scripted gen eds like traditional STEM courses, Chem 120, Math 114, Physics 220? I don't know, Rick, if you feel like it, or if there's any of our attendees that have thought about it in terms of in these particular types of courses.
I can speak specifically about geology because I've actually taught for several years in the physics, geology, and engineering technology department, and just in terms of the awareness that most of my teaching have been at the introductory course, but again in the lab sections there we have group work just as it relates to my discussion in this board of how people interact and share ideas, and dealing with things like natural disasters and perspectives on those, dealing with, of course, climate change. These are things that we flesh out in these the geology courses, things like impact of floods and that sort of thing, and again, what role we play as humans as we in turn impact the planet, and getting roundtable discussions there, sharing different ideas and perspectives. As I think everyone's aware, there's a lot of diversity, and particularly in the geology classes, a lot of international students, particularly from the Middle East that are in those courses. And to get these different perspectives just sort of broadens everyone's mind in terms of what a global community we really are, and the impact that we have, the interconnected impact that we have in all these things. I think it's with a little bit of thought, it's not that difficult in the other science disciplines, other STEM disciplines, to involve some group learning.
Great. Well, I'm sure you'd also be willing to chat with anybody who wanted some more feedback on that. In our closing moments, I'll just make reference to another question that was in the chat, even though we won't have time for an answer, is thinking about the impact of having high impact practices on courses for future teachers. I know Simsan, I know Kimberly's course, all of those have definitely have education students in that, and I can only imagine that that kind of one-on-one experience with the faculty that can make it even more meaningful will transfer then when they become teachers as well. So we are out of time. I'm going to have to wait. No, we have another 5 minutes, don't we? Yes, we have till 11 to 10. Never mind, Rick.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in and actually clarify and then address that particular question. Although Science 110 Integrated Science is a Gen Ed course, it is a requirement for pre-service teachers. And so we deal with this very directly, as I'm sure others do as well, in terms of when students walk into integrative science, as with most 100 level science courses, they're often, frankly, afraid of science. They're scared of it, and this just seemed to be the most innocuous one that they could take. But in terms of pre-service teacher training, they have to take this course as well as a biology course. And so we get a lot of people that really just are fearful of science. And so as Ashley was mentioning in the assessment, we have gotten some feedback directly in terms of the fact that, the improvement in terms of self-efficacy, that yes, I can do science. Yes, it is not some foreign language that I'll never understand. I actually see how it relates. And the best thing about this in terms of teachers is that they then, instead of hiding from science or teaching very watered down form in elementary or middle school or what have you, they actually get a little bit passionate about it. They see the connections and are able to take that into the classroom. And that, of course, continues the snowball effect of improvement of STEM.
Rick, why is it that this collaborative learning makes that possible, right? That it's not just that they get excited by the content, but that there's something about the way that this pedagogy allows them to start to feel confident.
I think it's, first of all, just realizing that they're not alone in terms of their feeling. And as people begin to sort of break down those personal barriers and begin to relate with others that are struggling, and as each person is kind of aware of the progress that others in the group are making, the lights start coming on. And of course, within the class context, we try to guide the conversation and make sure that there is progress being made. But it's been very fruitful, and you just see the smile. I mean, it's literally a physical change that often comes over the students as they're like, wow, I actually understand this. It's, kind of amazing. And that's, of course, very encouraging to us as instructors in the course that it's working.
I see Abdu's hand.
Yes, I just wanted to make a quick comment about, what everybody is talking about here, and really, just to reiterate why we, our main purpose of trying to tie this to Gen Ed, as you talked about it, because those are the courses you're most likely getting. Like, if I take the case of Rick, where you're getting non-science student in a course. So having them early on engage in this, I think is going to be very beneficial. And that would be the same for Jessica, for Kimberly, and for Megan. So in these courses, getting them exposed early on, I think is really very important. And also letting them understand, like science, for example, or math, or that, do, let's say, I'm going to say English because Emily's here. I'm an English major, I can do math. Or I'm an English major, I can do chemistry. So I think that's very important, especially hitting on the lifelong learning we talked about. And just another quick comment is, as you saw on that learning community, we have one on Gen Ed. And if you're here, I assume you have some interest in HIP and Gen Ed. And those are some of the things we could also talk about in that learning community. So please consider, attending and signing up for that one.
I'll just close by saying all the projects seem to do the two things that our speaker, Dr. Kinsey, mentioned, either transformation, which was what Rick was just talking about, that the experience was somehow transformative, or a product. So whether it's the Wikipedia information or the Mayerson, where they actually had an impact by giving money away, is a sort of project, right, or product. So all of those seem to fit nicely with the idea of what high impact practices that make them high impact, right? Which is one of the things, the quality she was talking about. Well, now I think we are really out of time. I really appreciate everyone's participation, especially our guests. And I thank you and have a little break, and then you'll go to your last session. So thanks again. Bye-bye.